House is Not a Home is written by Zan Gaudiuso. Zan Gaudiuso is an author from California. She has contributed many stories to and edited the famous Chicken Soup for the Soul book series. She is also the co-author of the award-winning book The Buddha Next Door. Zan is currently working on documentary about happiness while also writing a blog on the same subject. She is exploring what constitutes happiness in a time of change. So this was all about the author. Okay, as you can see the title of the story, a house is not a home. What does it mean? How a house or a home is formed? A home is complete when we share our feelings and affection with our loved and dear ones. So let's explore more and read more about the story. As you can see over here, this story reflects the challenges being faced by a teenager and the problems of growing up, isn't it? How does the author overcome his problem? So that is the thing. So this story reflects the challenges of being teenager and the problems of growing up, how the narrator goes to a new school and really really find problem in adjusting there with the new environment, with the new ambience in the surrounding, and with his new friends. He also feels lonely and depressed. He needs time to adjust to the new situation. But after some days, his house catches fires and he finds that his life has ended. He feels the loss of his home badly and he is very sad. And even he is sad by the loss of his pet tabby cat. But when his schoolmates show their concern for him, his whole vision for the life changes and he again starts taking interest in life. So this was all about a story in brief, introduction of the story in brief. So let's move on to the theme. As we read the story, just we will just know about the themes, also come to know more about the theme that is underlying in the story or that is present or that a story constitutes here. Okay, so let's begin. My first year of high school felt awkward. So who is this? My is a narrator. Okay, after leaving junior high at the head of my class with all the seniority the upper grade levels could afford me, it felt strange starting over as a freshman. Everybody feels strange when we go to a new place and we have to adjust to the new environment and the ambience. We definitely feel strange over there and we take time to adjust, but slowly as the time passes on we get adjusted to that place with the new people around us. The school was twice as big as my old school, and to make matters worse, my closest friends were sent to different high school. I felt very isolated, so the narrator was quite sad. So this is what are the problem that a teenager faces, isn't it? That is the loneliness and the monotony which they have to face in their life. I missed my old teachers so much that I would go back and visit them. They would encourage me. So the teacher in the old school always motivated him to get involved in school activities so that the narrator could meet new people. They told me that in time I would adjust and probably end up loving my new school more than I had my old one, isn't it? So this is what happens when we go to or when we visit a new place where we know that we have to adjust adjust with the friends and the people around us, isn't it? So there is no excuse anymore and we have to do so. They made me promise that when that happened I would still come by and visit them from time to time. I understood the psychology in what they are saying, but I took some comfort in it nonetheless. However, he took some comfort as he was motivated. He tried to soothe himself and then pacify with whatever with the words of what he heard by his teacher. One Sunday afternoon, not long after I had started high school, I was sitting at home at our dining room table doing homework. It was a cold and windy fall day, and we had a fire going in our fireplace in hearth. As usual, my red tabby cat was lying on top of all my papers, purring loudly and occasionally swatting at my pen for entertainment's sake. So here the narrator introduces his cat over here, that the cat, isn't it, was lying. The cat was red tabby cat, and she was lying on top of all his papers, purring loudly and occasionally swatting at his pen for entertainment's sake. She was never far from me, the narrator says. I'd rescued her when she was a kitten, when she was a young one, isn't it? And somehow she knew that I was the one responsible for giving her the good life. My mother kept stoking the fire to keep the house nice and warm. Suddenly I smelled something strange, and then I noticed its smoke pouring in through the seams of the ceiling. The smoke began to fill the room so quickly that we could barely see. Now the narrator noticed fire, the smoke, isn't it? Smoke pouring in through the seams of the ceiling. The smoke began, and he also noticed that the smoke began to fill the room so quickly that they were not able, that made the things completely go blind, and they were not able to see anything. Groping our way to somehow managing to move from the front door, isn't it, through the front door. We all ran into the front yard. By the time we made our way outside, the whole roof was engulfed in flames and it was spreading quickly. I ran to the neighbors to call the fire department while I watched my mother run back into the house. So he soon ran to the neighbor to call the fire department, isn't it? So that the things could be resolved. My mother then ran out of the house carrying a small metal box full of important documents. She dropped the case on the lawn and in a crazed state, here means mad state, isn't it? Ran back into the house. I knew what she was after. My father had died when I was young. The narrator says when he was very young, his father had died, and I was certain that she was not going to let his pictures and letters go up in flames. Go up in flames means get burnt in or turn into ashes and flames. They were the only things that she had to remember him by. Still, I screamed, I shouted at her, Mom, no! I was about to run after her when I felt a large hand hold me back. It was a fireman. I hadn't even noticed that the streets had already filled with fire trucks. I was trying to free myself from his grasp, from his hold, yelling me, shouting. Don't understand, my mother isn't there. He held on to me while other firefighters ran into the house. He knew that I wasn't acting very logically. It was not a sensible decision made by the narrator. The narrator says the way he was screaming, that was not reasonable, that was not logical, and that if he were to let go, I would run. He was right. It is all right. They will get her, he said. He wrapped a blanket round me and sat me down in our car. Soon after that, a fireman emerged from our house and my mom in too. He quickly took her over to the truck and put an oxygen mask on her. I ran over and hugged her. All those times I ever argued with her and hated her vanished at the thought of losing her. She's going to be okay, said the fireman. She just inhaled a little smoke and then he ran back to fight the fire while my mother and I sat there dazed. Means they were all confused. It was a very confusing situation for both of them, as they might have not dreamt that such thing could happen to them. Isn't it? The house was on fire. I remember watching my house burn down and thinking that there was nothing I could do about it. 5 hours later, the fire was finally out. Our house was almost completely burned down. But then it struck me, fire was finally out means it was extinguished, and then again, but then nothing was left, isn't it? The house was completely burned down. But then it struck me, I hadn't seen my cat. Where was my cat? Much to my horror, I realized that she was nowhere to be found. Then, all at once, to hit me, the new school, the fire, my cat, I broke down in tears and cried and cried. I was suffering loss big time. The firemen wouldn't let us go back into the house at night. It was still too dangerous, dead or alive. I couldn't imagine leaving without knowing about my cat. Regardless, I had to go, isn't it? But nothing could be done, and they have to move on. We piled into the car with just the clothes on our backs and a few of the firemen's blankets and made our way to my grandparents' house to spend the night. So, lastly, they went to their grandparents' house to spend their night. Now you can see they are trying to make their way, isn't it, groping our way to the front door. That is making their way, isn't it, through the front door. And they ran out into the front yard. By the time we made our way outside, the whole roof was engulfed. It was all engulfed in flames, means the house had started burning and it had caught fire now. And it was dangerously spreading everywhere, spreading quickly. And this is his cat. I hadn't seen my cat. Where was my cat? He says, much to my horror. I realized that she was nowhere to be found. Then all at once it hit me, the new school, the fire, my cat. I broke down in tears and cried and cried. The next day, Monday, I went to school. The narrator says that when the fire broke out, I was still wearing the dress I had worn to church that morning, but I had no shoes. I had kicked them off when I was doing my homework, and that had been, yet that was another casualty of fire. Means that was another victim of fire because the shoes was also burned in that firehouse or the fire that had covered the house entirely. So I had to borrow some tennis shoes from my aunt. Why couldn't I just stay home from school? He says. But the mother wouldn't hear of it. But I was totally embarrassed by everything. It was sad. The clothes I was wearing looked weird. It had become dirty, full of dust. I had no books or homework, and my backpack was gone. I had my life in that backpack because he was a student and all his books were kept in that bag. So no more he had his backpack. The more I tried to fit in, the worse it got. Was I destined to be an outcast and a geek all my life? Geek all my life. Now I started considering, when it's a human psychology, when a person faces such kind of situations or a terrible situation, a worse situation, he considers himself to be a loser. So here the narrator also says that was it that he would be destined to be an outcast and a geek or a boring person all his life, isn't it? That's what it felt like. I did not want to grow up, change, or have to handle life if it was going to be the same way. I just wanted to curl up and die. And he wanted to commit suicide. I walked around the school like a zombie. If you have played your video games, my dear children, you know that it's a very strange kind of creature, isn't it? Very unusual, strange, apathetic creature, you can say. Everything felt surreal, means bizarre, very strange, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen. All the security I had known from my old school, my friends, my house, my cat, had all been ripped away, was snatched by this fire. Okay, that took over the entire house, he says. When I walked through what used to be my house after school that day, I was shocked to see how much damage there was. Whatever hadn't burned was destroyed by the water and the chemicals that used to put out the fire. Isn't it? To put out the fire means, is a phrase, means to extinguish the fire. Isn't it? To stop the fire. The only material things not destroyed were the photo albums, documents, and some other personal items that my mother had managed to heroically rescue. Remember that his mother had gone inside the house, ran inside the house in order to, just save those materials, those important documents, or a kind of souvenir, you can say, or the memoirs that would serve her as a memoir, isn't it, in future, that were very important documents or photographs of her husband. Okay, but my cat was gone and my heart ached for her. There was no time to grieve. My mother rushed me out of the house. We would have to find a place to live, and I would have to go buy some clothes for school. We had to borrow money from my grandparents because there was no credit cards, cash, or even my identification to be able to withdraw money from the bank. Everything had gone up in smoke. That week, the rubble, the ashes that was left, that used to be our house, was being cleared off the lot. Even though we had rented an apartment nearby, I would go over to watch them clear away debris, hoping that my cat was somewhere to be found. You can see the human psychology, the emotional touch, the narrator has with his pet. I kept thinking about her as that vulnerable little kitten, that poor little kitten, isn't it? Vulnerable in the early morning. Vulnerable also here means unsafe now, because the cat was no more. He couldn't find his cat anywhere. In the early morning, when I would disturb her and get out of bed, she would tag along after me. She would move along with him, with the narrator, climb up my rope, he says, and crawl into my pocket to fall asleep. I was missing her terribly. It always seems that bad news spreads quickly, and in my case, it was no different. Everyone in high school, including the teachers, was aware of my plight. My plight means my condition. I was embarrassed, as if somehow I was responsible. What a way to start off at a new school. This was not the kind of attention I was looking for, the narrator says. It was horrible incident, and bad news, he says, spreads quickly. So everybody, he thought, was sympathetic towards his condition, and that was, he did not expect, and they don't want this way to start the school. The next day at school, people were acting even more strange than usual. I was getting ready for gym class at my locker. People were milling around me, moving around aimlessly from here to there, he says, asking me to hurry up. I thought it strange, but in the light of the past few weeks, nothing could surprise me. It almost seemed that they were trying to shove me into the gym. Then, shove me means push him into the gym. Then I saw why. There was a big table set up with all kinds of stuff on it just for me. They'd taken up a collection and bought me school supplies, notebooks, all kinds of different clothes, jeans, tops, sweatsuits. It was like Christmas, he says. I was overcome by emotion. People who had never spoken to me before were coming up to me to introduce themselves. I got all kinds of invitations to their houses. The genuine outpouring of concern really touched me. So here the narrator got emotional, isn't it? Because he thought that everybody was deliberately trying to push him. But finally, when he was pushed into the gym room, he found all the amenities which he required, necessary for him, and that was a very overwhelming situation for him, and he got emotional. He was overcome with emotions. I made friends that day. A month later, I was at my house watching them rebuild it. But this time it was different. I wasn't alone. I was with two of my new friends from school. So finally, it started adjusting to the new school. It took a while for me to stop focusing on my feelings of insecurity and open up to all the wonderful people around me. So it's a matter of chance. When you don't give space to people around you, nobody is going to welcome you in their life, isn't it? Now I was sitting there watching my house being rebuilt, and I realized my life was doing the same thing. While we sat there on the curb, sitting there planning my new bedroom, I heard someone walk up to me from behind and say, "Does this belong to you?" When I turned around to see who it was, I couldn't believe my eyes. He says, a woman was standing there holding my cat. I leapt up. He just jumped up and grabbed her out of the woman's arms. I held her close to me and cried into the beautiful orange fur. She purred happily. Who purred happily? The cat. My friends were hugging me, hugging the cat, jumping around. apparently my cat had been so freaked, she had become so weak by the fire that she ran over a mile away. Her collar had our phone number on it, but our phones had been destroyed and disconnected. This wonderful woman took her in and worked hard to find out whose cat it was. Somehow she knew that this cat was loved and sorely missed. As I sat there with my friends and my cat curled up in my lap, all the overwhelming feelings of loss and tragedy seemed to diminish. I felt gratitude for my life, my new friends, the kindness of stranger, and the loud purr of my beloved cat. My cat was back, and so was I. So, what we come to know from the story, or after reading this story, see, life is what we make, isn't it? And how, what kind of attitude do we possess, isn't it? So that makes our life actually. So the basic theme here that is hidden beneath the story, I think, is all of us love our home, right? The happiness and warmth it provides makes us quite happy. But when a serious incident happens, it throws everything out of order and we feel very sad. Right, my dear children? So this lesson gives us the message that a happy home is essential for us. It also conveys that one should not grieve over material loss. As long as one has emotional support, one can overcome any loss. So at last, the narrator realizes, as you have read in the previous line, that he says that he was very overwhelmed and he was taken over by emotion, isn't it? Why? Because he had now found, isn't it, his friends and the family members surrounding him, and finally he had got back his cat also, right? So people come forward to help us in times of difficulty. So definitely our attitude towards our life decides our life, isn't it? So it's we who can change our life by our hard work and by our positive attitude also. So they help us to put back all the family members and dear ones, as you have learned from this story, isn't it? So they help us to put back our life in order. Helping others in need and being grateful while getting help are the two values one should acquire. So here we end our story. There are few words that you need to know, that is stoking the fire, feeding and tending the fire, zombie, a dull and apathetic person, surreal, strange, bizarre, then milling around, moving in an aimless manner, show, push hard. So the story has a happy ending, isn't it? Not every story does have, but still the knight is quite happy, as you can see that he had found his cat, and then finally he had got, he was on the verge of being, revived now, isn't it? And no more insecurity existed, right? So thank you everyone, hope you have enjoyed the story.